What's up, everybody? Ben Cruz here, the head of sports programming at Vover, and welcome to another episode of One and Done here on Vover. The concept of One and Done is very simple. One guest, one question, one answer. That is it. We're looking to bring you the best guests and the best questions on every show, which will lead to the best answers. On today's episode, we welcome one of UC Santa Barbara's most famous alumni, joining prestigious names like Steve Aoki, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Barry Zito. But I would argue out of all of them, he has the best beard. He is a massive Golden State Warriors fan, and the primary reason why I've heavily invested in sports cards in the past year, and as such is the reason why my wife asks me what various eBay charges are when going through our finances. He is a co-host on Vover's The Scuffle Show alongside UFC star Tatiana Suarez and social media legend Buster Scher. He was the founder of a not-so-little website called Zappos.com in 1999, and among other projects now that he is a part of, is the founder and CEO of Vover. It is the boss man himself, Nick Swinmurn. Nick, welcome to One and Done. This isn't my question, more so just a greeting, but how are you doing today?
I knew that question was coming. I've listened enough to know that the first question, which isn't a question, is coming. Thanks for the introduction. I'm doing good. Don't forget Jim Rome. Jim Rome is another gaucho.
Jim, there was a fat list that I was going through, and he was on there. I did notice him, but
he didn't make the top three.
I had to go with Aoki, Paltrow, and Zito. That was I felt like a strong three. Michael Douglas, also from UC Santa Barbara. Sean Hannity, omitted him for other reasons, but I think that's a pretty solid top three to be aligned with. But yeah, again, thanks for coming on.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've been wondering what my one question is. You're a very loyal listener, so first of all, thank you for listening. But I'm sure
I'm hoping it's a duplicate. You ask someone else, and I can just use their answer.
Yeah, I'm actually going to bring it back just to see if people are paying attention.
My favorite episode of Entourage.
Yeah. There you go. See, that's a callback episode. So listen to the Doug Ellen episode if you haven't already. All right, Nick. So here's my one question for you. As I mentioned, while introducing you, you founded Zappos, Vover, and of course, a bunch of other projects. But recently, you've embarked on a new project, entering the NFT space, Moons of Mars, and NFTs have obviously caught fire over the past year or so. I read on Business Insider today that 2021 alone, total sales volume is somewhere in the neighborhood of like $12 billion. And you have your industry leaders so far, with the likes of Bored Ape and CryptoPunks, just to name a few. With Moons of Mars minting today, Nick, what about the NFT space drew you to jumping into the space, and piggybacking off of that, what is going to separate Moons of Mars from other NFT projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I've listened before when people are like, how are we going to, how long can I go on one question? Unfortunately for you, I can ramble forever. So
I know.
I'm going to be the first guest cut off and said, hey, enough, one and enough. We're done with this. Yeah, no, it's interesting. You mentioned sports cards earlier because, when COVID hit, we're in quarantine. All of a sudden, I reconnected with sports cards. So when I was a kid, I was a huge collector. I was obsessed. I'd go to the store, stamps to the attic pretty much every day. When I was in college, the first business I started was I was selling sports cards at trade shows, ran out of cards, and that turned into lithographs. So it was really fun to kind of get back into the whole collectibles side of things during the quarantine, like a lot of people did. And that eventually led me to Top Shot, which was my first kind of foray into digital, NFTs, sports cards, and which eventually led me to really diving into the greater NFT market overall. So what really excited me, the more I got into it, was like, well, one, right, compared to sports cards, it was very clean. It was like, you own it. It's very clear that you own it. It's very clear which one it is. You're not worried about condition, quality. You're not worried about having it shipped to you. You're not worried about getting it graded. So it was like, wow, this is a very simple way, even though I don't get to touch it, this is a very simple way of verifying it. And at the time, I think that's the big, as people approach it, this question of like, well, I don't get to touch it. it's like, well, what I realized with my sports cards was I'd gotten to the point, your wife might have similar thoughts, where I'm like getting all these eBay packages like nonstop in the mail all day. It's just like,
Yeah.
it just feels
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's almost like embarrassing. You're embarrassed when you see the mailman, you're embarrassed when you tell your wife, and it's like, you're just such a mess. And then you got all these things lying around. So eventually I'd gotten to the point where when I was buying them, I was having them shipped directly to a vault, the PWCC vault, where they would unpack everything. And then they would just, take a scan of the card front and back, and they would post it to my collection. And then if I wanted to send it from there, I'd send it from there to get graded. If I wanted to sell it, just go directly. So I was never actually touching the cards. So it was easier for me at that point to go, wait a minute, I'm not even touching these. Like, they do exist somewhere, I guess, is the difference. But it wasn't as much of a leap as I might have thought prior to that. And then I was just kind of looking at it like, well, this is interesting because, people are using them as their avatars, their PFPs. And like, there's a sense of community and almost like a membership aspect to it, which I didn't feel the same thing in sports cards. And then you kind of looked at the technical barriers to entry, and it like wasn't that great. And it was like, wow, this is really a great opportunity to collect, but also express yourself, and a simple business model to reach a consumer directly. Like if you're an artist or you're someone starting a project, it's a very simple, easy to understand way to say, hey, this is what we have. It's easy for the user on the other thing to find you and say, I like this, verify that it's legit. The transfer of ownership takes place very cleanly. It was a little, it's a little tricky first getting into the wallet and all that stuff. But once you get into it, it just seems so much more efficient than anything else. So I thought, I started collecting and just trying to learn about new projects. And it's the same as cards. It became a little overwhelming after a while of like, oh, there's so many different things, and I just can't follow along with all of them. So my brain went more to, I want to do a project. Like, what's a project I could do or we can do, and what would make it different, right? And so I was reading about like, the utility and looking at it a lot. The utility in some projects would give you full commercial rights. Some wouldn't. Some would have a roadmap that included maybe merch or a in real life meetup or access to a game. And so I really became kind of fascinated with that, more the membership utility side versus just purely as a collectible. So ultimately I decided, okay, that's interesting, but like, what's different? Like, I've never been huge on social media. I'm not starting with this audience that's clamoring for something from me or from the team. Like, we're just kind of been, what can we do? And so eventually Moons of Mars emerged from that. And it was like, I think art, right? The art's got to pop. The art's got to be different. Fortunately, there's an artist, Brian Zellner, I've been working with for probably 13, 14 years. He was the original artist in Dethrone, the clothing brand we had, and has kind of done a bunch of stuff. We did a poster series with the Golden State Warriors at one point. He designed those, and he's kind of always been, he's a concert poster and branding artist, right? And so that's kind of that's what he does. And so it was like, well, let's just take that, and I've always enjoyed working with him because like, if I had an idea in my head, I could explain it to him and I knew that he would understand it. We've worked together long enough, he would understand it, and he would come out with something which was better than what I imagined in my head. So I was like, well, let's start with the art. Well, let's tell a story. So, let's, actually just look through some of the existing projects, and one had made this fictitious band, The Fated, Fated, for no reason other than just creative curiosity, right? So I made a bunch of like fake shirts, created fake tours, and I had just told Brian like in the past, hey, let's just, give me like a dozen tour shirts for this fake band. And it was just a fun project that got to do some graphic stuff. And I thought I'll just wear them, I'll wear them one day instead of just, of course, order them and put them in the warehouse. But thought, well, what if we take that, if you take the spirit of NFTs of like, each one's unique, and there's two times, right? So the NFTs are each one is different, right? And so the 721, and so you looked at the part of the story where the Fated was the fictitious story, was the reason you've never heard of them is because they never recorded an album, because every time they play is different. So I realized this art and storytelling was already there. We were already kind of doing that, even as just as a hobby. So how could we take that and then continue it, and through that drop, have this adventure where this crowd gets abducted, taken up to a planet, Hellebore, which is the previously undiscovered third moon of Mars. And you can just get lost in the story, and you can think visually of all these interesting graphics and characters and things that we could build in this world, which in and of itself, I think is an interesting project, but it just felt like, you want that happy delusion. Like, I'm fully aware of the fact that there's good delusion, but you also want to say, like, but what can we do that no one's doing, right? Or no one seems to be focusing on for the moment. So we just kind of kept looking, and we found, like, what's more utility, right? So it's like, okay, we can tell the story through these images. We can have characters that are revealed through these images. You're part of this club. You get access to merch and, private, channels and that kind of stuff. That just didn't seem like enough. So it was like, well, what about if you tap into that commercial rights idea and being a holder, like having a, Bored Ape Yacht Club, and saying, well, I could do something with this, but I don't know what. It was like, well, what if we tapped into that? What if we really focused on brands? Like, if this is like Web3, right? Like, this is the next generation of the web. There should be brands launched out of Web3. It shouldn't just always be, and this is the exciting part, if you're passionate about startups, like, it shouldn't just be Web 2.0 companies evolve into Web3, and Web3 shouldn't just be infrastructure stuff. There should be new brands. There should be collaborations with existing brands is great. But what if we could just create? And then that was like, well, wait a minute. What if we, DAOs, which are ways of organizing ownership, and so that the community really does have true ownership and a vote in the direction of things. And again, it's Web3, so it's all very clearly defined, very easy to understand. Then if we do that, we can, that would be really interesting, because now we could launch these community-owned brands. So we could tap into our existing creativity, some of the existing assets and people we have in place and tools we have in place, create a system to then introduce brands to the community, right? So the first mint, the mint that's now live, are the 2,400 fans able to attend this concert, The Faded, right? So we call the fans the Renegades. So the Renegades, the first 2,400, they go to this planet. Now, instead of just like, what do they find, what's out, we can tap into, what do they need to survive? What are they going to eat? What are they going to drink? What are they going to wear? How are they going to communicate? What are they going to do for fun? We can take those ideas in this fictional metaverse and, introduce those graphically, but also set them up as in real life brands, that it's like, on this new planet, what would, take that and then create a real life equivalent. And then for the Renegades, give them access to these products, so that these products that are created in Web3 in the spirit of Web3 do, but they still actually exist in real life. And so that's a basic idea. And I think we've broken it up into chapters. Every chapter will have a new species. It'll have collectibles. It'll have some gameplay, and it'll have at least 2 brands. And we've taken the past few months and built out chapter 1, so that now that we're minting, the story can start. It's not a project where we're going to mint and then disappear for a while and build. We'll be working on chapter 2 while the community of Renegades are experiencing chapter 1. And then eventually we can take that process and onboard third-party crew or rights holders or brands into, hey, we've launched our own brands. Now the community has decided they want something in this space. We can either create that from scratch, or we can find a creator to partner with, or we can, a brand that can, could say, like, well, how can I exist in your world? Anyway, so that was my long-winded rambling. I'd have broken the record for longest consecutive answer without a breath.
And people
that was the long answer.
People who don't know you well might think that was a long answer. To me, that was a shorter answer.
Yeah.
That was a shorter answer that that you usually give during our meetings.
I told someone the other day, I said, man, what's up with these long calls? Like, I can't stand these long calls. Every call has to be long. It doesn't matter what it's about. And the person said, have you ever thought about the fact that you might be the common
denominator
in all of these calls? And it just, I was like, I kind of laughed, but I was like, oh no, wait, I'm the long-winded one. I'm the reason why. So,
well, no, I mean,
answered your question.
No, it very much did. And it's, again, I'm still learning, and as I think a lot of people are, about kind of what this NFT space entails, and, trying to fully grasp what it's all about, right? Because it's still relatively new. As I threw those figures out earlier, but again, still relatively new, and people are just attaching it, to the fact that, people like Steph Curry are invested in this stuff, Andre Iguodala, the bigger names, but like, I think what you're doing with, kind of creating this evolution of what an NFT is what's super interesting about Moons. And, I think it's going to be, a great, you talked about the barrier for entry, kind of at the beginning there. I think what you're doing here with Moons is, I think, kind of lowering that barrier, which is a good thing, right? Like if you want the space to grow, you just need more people in that space, and kind of make it more of an achievable goal to be part of it. So I think that's awesome.
If you look at it like, prior to COVID, lived in a town in the Bay Area and decided like this town needs a gym. So built a gym, right? And then it came up with a concept, built a gym. This town needs a Mexican restaurant. So created a concept, opened it. This town should have a Warriors store. So partnered with the Warriors and created a store. And it was great because you walk around town and you're in that community, you understand what they want, you're getting instant feedback, you see people across the different locations, and it really felt good. And so then the idea was like, well, let's take these brands and replicate them across other communities through franchising. So we'll find someone who knows their community well, and we'll give them a tool set to open these same things. But then COVID kind of derailed that. And so if you look at, the opportunity in with Web3 and creating a community, it's really just that. It was like, wait a minute, we don't like, instead of going to a physical town and looking around and saying, what do we need, and building it, and then being able to enjoy it with the community and take their feedback on what we should do next, let's just create a fake planet. Let's send up a bunch of renegades, 2,400, visually interesting, late 90s rock show attendees. And then let's just do the same thing. Let's just communicate, online, and let's figure out like, what do we need here? Okay, let's create that brand. And then, oh, you guys enjoy that? What do you think we should do next? Let's do that one. So it's just taking that kind of real life thing. And this is like just different technology, which is kind of making it easier to track. It's making it where you don't have to scale infinitely. You can take a smaller group of people like you would find in a town. And you could just say, hey, there's a model now where we can all be rewarded. It's all clear what we own. We have the opportunity to resell it or share it or all these different things, but all the decisions are in each person's hand. The same way you have a choice of like walking into a restaurant, you have those same choices in this universe. And it's great for relationships with customers customers, it's like not even customers, community, because like, in a restaurant, if someone leaves, you don't really know why did they leave? When did they leave? Did they leave and they just went on vacation? Right. That's why they didn't come back or anything like that. Whereas this, it's much simpler. So I think it's I think it's just trying to take those basic human things we have in our local communities and replicate that across something where there's no geography. So I'm excited. And the Hellebore Broadcasting Company will be putting out content relaying what's going on Hellebore. Also, what's happening on Earth is going to play a role in the gameplay on Hellebore, which is the planet. And so and we'll also try to put out info which will help onboard and educate people into what's possible, because it took a long time. It hasn't been that long, but it takes a long time to really understand. As soon as you understand one thing, it's like, wait, well then what's that? What's that? But when the light bulb goes off and you understand that it's fairly simple in its complexity, then all of a sudden, for anyone, I mean, this really is something where anyone has the ability to kind of create whatever they want and find an audience for it. If you look at Web 2 was about, hey, check me out, look at me on the outside. This is what I've got. This is what I am, kind of very showy. And for more introverted people, Web 3 is more about like, here's what I think, here's the creativity I have inside me, and you can share that. So I think that's what's exciting.
For an introvert like myself, Web3 sounds incredible. So does Moons of Mars. Nick, that's it. That's your one and done experience. I wanted to throw it to you to plug anything else you've got going on, or drop any other info that you wanted to drop on Moons of Mars. Whatever you got, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. Well, the on Twitter I'm at Coast Hawk, and then the Moons of Mars, the project is at Moons of Mars NFT on Twitter. Discord, we're discord.gg/Moons of Mars. And the website, if you want to mint a renegade and join the community, it's moonsofmars.xyz.
.xyz.
Yeah,
is that
Web 3.0? It's a new world.
Wow. So
So
.com is so what is that? So 90s?
yeah,
So 2021?
That's that's Earth. You know, we're up
Oh,
in the we're up on
that's
another
right.
planet.
We're on a different planet. Well, there you go.
So
Nick, thanks so much for coming on One and Done, and hope to have you back on again soon.
awesome. Thanks for having me.